Why you be all on my line about nothing? Why won't you go get you $1 or something? Dollar or something. $1 or something.
Recording live in the Conscious Creative Media Studios from somewhere in the middle of nowhere, North Carolina, you are listening to the world's greatest photography podcast with your host, Bill Howard.
Thank you, Scott, and welcome to the world's greatest photography podcast. We can be heard on a number of podcast sites such as iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcast, even Amazon Alexa and iHeartRadio. And of course, you can see us here on YouTube at Conscious Creative Media, and that's creative with a CRE8 IVE. And before we get into our guest today, I want to give a quick shout out to Scott Balcom of Imagination Creation Films. He has been more help than he'll ever know the past few days, and he's also our announcer for the show here. So again, thank you much. If you haven't seen Scott's YouTube channel, just look up Scott Balcom, Balkum, and he's got some fantastic work there. As for today, on the world's greatest photography podcast, we have none other than one of the most famous, social media famous anyway, photographers, especially for football. He is also Temple University Owls official photographer, Mr. Zamani Feelings. How you doing today, Zamani?
I'm doing good, Bill. Thanks a lot. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for having me here.
Thank you for coming on board. I guess we've known each other through social media for about 4 years now. Does that sound about right?
Right, yeah. Yeah, it's been about 4 years, 2015, 2016-ish.
Yeah, somewhere in there.
Like that, so, yeah.
I'm working on my 5th year of full-time photography. I think you kind of went full-time with it about a year before me.
Yeah, I was full-time, went full-time with photography. I started photography in 2010. I went full-time in 2013, and I didn't get into sports photography until a couple of years after that.
That's okay. I got you. The sports side of it. Yeah. Well, Zamani, on this first segment, we're going to do something that we're going to do at every show. And so I've got to ask you one question. When you shoot sports photography, do you use single shot, short burst, or spray and pray?
I use short bursts generally.
Okay. Well, I'm going to throw you a little bit off kilter here today then, because this segment is called Spray and Pray. Now, Spray and Pray is where we ask questions of our guests, give answers in hopes of finding something for me to talk about, because although this is the world's greatest photography podcast, I am not the world's greatest podcast host. So, Zamani, you ready for this?
Yes, I'm ready.
All right. DSLR or mirrorless?
Well, my experience has been DSLR up until now. I actually just purchased my first mirrorless camera about 3 weeks ago, and so I'm kind of making the dive into them. I still see cameras as cameras. The big advantage for me personally with mirrorless is, of course, the instant exposure through the viewfinder. But for me, mainly, I wanted one of them because I wanted to use it to shoot low angle and high angle. And for the lower angle things, of course, you can lay down and shoot like that, but this makes it more convenient. And for the high angle stuff where you're holding things overhead of, like, say, a group of guys that are in a huddle, a lot of times you do have to spray and pray when you're using a DSLR because you can't really see what you're getting. And this would help me to be able to see actually what I'm capturing from those high angles. I think mirrorless is definitely where all the cameras are going and the direction where all the camera companies are going. I can't say for sure whether or not the DSLR will ever be extinct, but it seems like that's where the direction that all the camera companies are going right now. I just see mirrorless as kind of an extension of DSLRs where they're adding extra new technology to things that we didn't have at the previous time. And that's my, I'm not pro or con with either one. I think they both have their advantages. And so I'm curious to see what they'll do with the mirrorless cameras in the future.
Yeah, and we're going to talk more about the mirrorless camera you got as far as to get perspectives in the third segment. Because I know I follow you as well, of course, so I kind of know where you're headed on that. And in this interview, we're going to get into getting different perspectives in order to draw the correct composition that we're looking for. Now, the next question is one that'll start a fight. Canon, Nikon, or Sony?
Well, yeah, this is me. I've never been a brand guy in that way. I noticed the advantages and disadvantages, or the things that some camera companies offer or had offered that they didn't have with others. But right now, Canon is 90% of my lens and camera makeup is Canon gear. But when I started off, I got a Panasonic. I'm actually shooting on a Panasonic right now. I've shot with Sony's. I had a Sony A55 before I got my Canon. But Canon, it depends on the camera and lens that you have. But if I had to make any distinctions between them, Canon for me always gave me the most pleasing color rendition, skin tone rendition. Nikon, from what I've heard, I haven't used Nikon extensively, does a little better on the high ISO and that sort of thing. And with Sony, their latest cameras seem to be really technologically advanced and offer a lot of features that aren't in some of the more modern cameras that Canon and Nikon have. But if I had to say I had a preference for any one, it would be my Canon cameras, the early Canon cameras.
And I know I don't know the designations of all the Canon cameras, but I know you're really sold on, was it the Mark III? Mark II?
Well, what I found with the early 5D and for portraiture and anything outside of sports, and that's only because of the speed issue, my favorite cameras are the 5D Classic and the 5D Mark II. And then even though I use the 1DX for all my sports images, the original 1DX, but what I found with the earlier Canon cameras is the further you go back, the more of a filmic and natural and sort of organic look that they have. So that's what I really liked about the 5D Classic. So much so that I haven't upgraded to. There's been 3 generations of 5Ds now, and I haven't upgraded past the 5D Mark II, which was released in 2008 or 2007, somewhere around there. So for my portraits and weddings and everything, I'm still using a camera that's approaching almost 10 years old. But I just love the look of the files. And it seems like progressively each Canon series has kind of looked a little more digital than I preferred. But but I use the 5D and the 5D Mark II for all my portraiture and events and weddings and everything.
And I know weddings are your favorite thing to shoot.
It's a favorite payout for me.
You and I are on the same boat with weddings. It's
right.
If I don't have to shoot a wedding, I'm not going to.
You know what? Weddings have done a lot for me. I think weddings helped me with composition, which we're going to talk about a lot. Doing a lot of weddings and portraiture and everything. Weddings are what initially got all of the gear that I needed and allowed me to pay for my 400 millimeter and 300 and my 1DX and everything like that, and to continue to buy stuff. So I don't want to knock weddings, but I mean, it's not I like the images that I get afterwards, but the process is not really that much fun. It's not enjoyable. And I've been doing it for 10 years. So, I think they said the average wedding photographer burns out in 2.5 years. So do something for 10 years like that and still, the novelty wears off and it just kind of becomes, kind of old hat. But I do like the money. So.
I can understand that. Okay, Next question. OEM lenses, Tamron or Sigma?
You know what? It really depends on the actual lens. And I was one of those people that was kind of steer clear of off-brand lenses when I originally started shooting with Canon. But over time, the Tamron released a few lenses that I thought were really great. The Tamron 15-30 is one of the best wide-angle lenses out there. Some people would argue the best. Sigma, of course, has made great advances in their lens technology, and their Sigma Art series, of course, are some of the best that rival Canon. So with lenses, I'm not any longer a brand guy, or I don't feel like it has to be a native lens that, or made by Canon or anything like that. Y'all have to take them individually now.
Yeah,
really
and I'm sold on Tamron myself. I don't see enough difference between, say, a Nikon lens and a Tamron lens in order to pay the extra money for it.
Yeah. I mean, and there's some lenses that Canon puts out that have some issues, and Sigma comes out and they put out one that has that kind of addresses those issues. It may be better, maybe sharper. There's some Sigma lenses that are great for
the Sigma art lenses are fantastic. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. The only thing I would say is, like, for sports photographers, you have to be careful about making sure that the lenses are also track fast, because they may be sharp and they may have great color rendition, and you see pictures with them and you say, wow, that's a great lens. But, from what a Canon representative told me once, he said that the other camera manufacturers don't have their secret sauce in terms of the tracking focus and continuous focus. So, but I still see people that shoot with Sigma art lenses and Tamron lenses, and they get good results with sports. So that's the only caveat I would throw in there for sports photographers, in particular, is that you have to be mindful about the track, because when you watch lens reviews, they very rarely ever test them to see how well they work in continuous focus. They're usually just shooting with them and doing sharpness tests and seeing how sharp the edges are and that kind of thing, but they don't usually test them. They may test the autofocus in single shot really quickly, but they don't generally test them in tracking a fast-moving subject. But that's not to say that they're not all great or anything like that. That's just like a little caveat.
You are listening to the world's greatest photography podcast with your host, Bill Howard.
We're here with Zamani Feelings today, and you can follow him at his website, which is zamanifeelings.net, or on Twitter at Zam919, ZAM919, or on Instagram at Zamani Feelings Photography. And that brings us to Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Facebook has done everything for me for my business. I just started really being consistently active with Instagram recently. I would post for a while, but it's gotten to the point now where I'll post or I'll do something like create a story or something maybe every day or twice a day. And I'm actually using the app more often. Facebook is what's done everything for me. Facebook is the place where I started sharing my initial images when I was just doing photography as a hobby. Facebook is the place where I started developing a customer base. Facebook is kind of basically where I got my name out there. It's probably generated 90% of my business until I started, getting predominantly word of mouth clients. And Facebook is where I found the sports photography groups, which was even more important for me, and where I was able to connect with other sports photographers. So Facebook has been it for me. Twitter, I post occasionally. I very rarely do anything but maybe post a picture or two, or share or retweet something. And Instagram, I've just been using that more, and it's been predominantly for my sports photography. But if I had to delete every social media account I had except one, I would get rid of everything except for Facebook.
Now, Facebook limits the number of friends you can have on a personal basis at 5,000, and I know you've come up to that limit several times. How can people find you best other than going to, say, the sports photography groups on Facebook?
Well, the one thing that Facebook does, it only allows you 5,000 friends, but you are allowed to follow me. So I have a bunch of followers, people that follow me, as well as people that are friends. So if you go to Facebook and it's facebook.com/Zam919, you can follow me. And you can also inbox me if you wanted to talk to me or had any questions. So you'll still be able to follow me. We just won't be technically friends. And I interact with a lot of people on there who aren't actually on my friends list. And they can still comment on my posts and that sort of thing, and we can interact on the app.
All right, next question: back button focus or shutter release?
Oh man, people are gonna be mad at me. So I'm a sports photographer who uses shutter release. Once in a while, I use back button focus, but generally, and to be totally honest, it was just out of habit. I had switched to back button focus for a while. I found it a little more challenging with basketball. So when basketball season hit, I remember going back to shutter release, and then I just hadn't gone back to back button focus. I did use it for a time, for about a year, and I just got out of the habit of doing it, and I went back to shutter focus. But I haven't found a big difference in my keeper rate with either of them, using either function.
This is another show that we were talking about that we could do strictly on that, and we could get a number of hits because I'm shutter release also.
Yeah. I just I don't know. I mean, it's just a matter of getting yourself back into the muscle memory of doing it. I just feel like it's just another thing that I have to go to do. You know, I mean, I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's laziness or what, but shutter release has been fine for me, so I've just been sticking with that. And I felt almost guilty about it for a long time. And then one of the wildlife photographers, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but he was a really good wildlife photographer, and he said he uses a shutter release button, and he knows the cameras inside and out, and he does excellent reviews. And I said, okay, well, if he uses it, and he's a really good wildlife photographer, which is very similar to sports photography. I would say that's the closest to sports photography in terms of the mechanics of capturing things. And so I just said, okay, it's working for me, so I just keep going with it.
Exactly. All right, so we're gonna skip forward a little bit, and be sure to catch us on all the podcast sites as well as on this YouTube channel. The podcast will come out every Monday, and on the YouTube channel, we're going to do this in 3 segments. That'll come out on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. So make sure you never miss a show. Now, we're here today with Zamani Feelings. He's the Temple Owls University sports photographer. Zamani, Windows or Mac?
I went Macintosh in about 2010, and I've been Macintosh ever since. But I got into photography. The advice that I got from some of my friends who are already photographers and some graphic designers was get a Macintosh. It's best for multimedia and the type of things that you're doing. And I ended up getting a Mac. I like the 27 iMac, so I got that. I got this chance to be able to see my pictures and really big and on the screen. And then I just got hooked on it. I like the user-friendly nature of them, and I'm kind of all bought into the whole ecosystem since I have an iPad and an iPhone. So I'm just I'm Macintosh now, but I know there's great Windows computers out there, and I don't think one is superior to the other in terms of in terms of usage for what we do. But I just do love Macs, and of course that comes at a cost in terms of expense, but I prefer Macintosh.
How about Adobe or DaVinci?
I've been Adobe. I use Lightroom and Adobe Camera Raw, even though I don't use Lightroom for sports, and that's probably like a whole nother conversation. But I'm pretty much Adobe guy. I haven't tried the DaVinci programs yet, but I've just gotten so used to my workflow and how I edit in Camera Raw that I'm pretty comfortable. I don't think it would enhance anything I was doing at all. Yeah, so Adobe for me.
Now, you've already mentioned Lightroom. How about Photoshop?
Yeah, well, I do. That's what I use primarily for sports. I edit most of my sports photos in Adobe Camera Raw and Photoshop. So that's what I use for all my sports photography. Between a combination of that and Photo Mechanic. But I edit my pictures in Camera Raw as opposed to Lightroom.
See, and that's kind of interesting because when I shoot, say, NC State basketball, I have a preset that I've made in Lightroom, so I can just load all the photos into Lightroom, run it through that preset, and everything's edited. The only thing I have left is to crop.
Okay. Yeah, like for me, I don't know what it is, but when I use Lightroom, I just felt like the final export of my JPEG was a little better when I use Camera Raw. And then when I initially started out shooting sports, I was using a similar editing process that I did with my portraiture, where I was using a program called Visco Films. They're now like extinct. They have they just went to phone-based presets and everything. But these were like film simulator things. It's very subtle look, the ones that I was using, but it did give it a certain look. And those were the ones I had. I used them in Camera Raw. But yeah, I mean, I know I'm not saying like Lightroom does a bad job or editing. I just, over time, I got more comfortable. I just felt like there was a slightly better JPEG that I got from Adobe Camera Raw. But it could be something with my settings and Lightroom and everything like that. So, but that's basically it. But I do use Lightroom when I do weddings and really big events. Anything that requires like a ton of images, I will use Lightroom for those. But when I want to go tweak something in particular, like a sports photo, or just even my portraits, I'll use Camera Raw and Photoshop.
Well, this completes the first segment. And if you're watching on YouTube, the second segment will come out on Wednesday. We're having a conversation with Zamani Feelings about sports photography, and specifically in sports photography compositions. If you're listening to the podcast, hang on just a minute after this break.
Why you be all on my line about nothing? Why won't you go get you $1 or something? $1 or something. Get you $1 or something. Something. Why you be all on my line about nothing? Why won't you go get you $1 or something? $1 or something. Get you $1 or something. Something. Why you be all on my line about nothing? Why won't you go get you $1 or something? $1 or something. Get you $1 or something. Something. Why you be all on my line about nothing? Why won't you go get you $1 or something? $1 or something. $1 or something, 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 something.